The chandeliers of the Astoria Grand gleamed like falling stars, scattering shards of gold across the marble floor as Amara Collins stepped into the center of the gala. She inhaled quietly, wishing the air would steady her. It didn't. The clinking of crystal glasses, the low hum of classical music, the elegant dresses sweeping the floor, they all pressed on her like a weight she hadn't asked to carry. She smoothed the black satin dress her friend insisted she borrow, trying to ignore how it hugged her too tightly, trying not to think of the worn-out pair of scrubs her mother had worn the last time Amara saw her conscious. "You can't look like a junior paralegal tonight," her colleague had said. "Clients smell fear." Fear. Yes. They would smell it on her now. The scent of bills she couldn't pay, of a mother slipping away, of dreams that cost more than she had. She forced a smile at the passing attorneys, their conversations a blur of mergers, litigation victories, and vacations that sounded like fairy tales. Everyone here seemed to belong. Everyone except her. When the room felt too tight, she slipped away, weaving through the crowd until she found a quieter hallway near the terrace. She leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. 5 minutes. She whispered to herself. Then you go back in. But the universe, it seemed, was impatient. Someone turned the corner at the same moment she stepped forward. A shoulder broad and solid collided with hers, sending a shock through her entire body. Oh! Her champagne flute flipped in the air. Time stretched. The golden liquid splashed directly across the chest of a man's charcoal Armani suit. A suit so sharply tailored, it probably cost more than her monthly salary. Amara froze. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. She reached for a napkin she didn't have. He reached too. She stumbled on her heel. Gravity tugged. Her hand hit his chest. His arm caught her waist. And then her lips brushed his. Not a kiss, not really. Just the faintest, breathless collision of two strangers' mouths. A spark shot through her so violently she forgot to breathe. She jerked back, mortified. I didn't mean I wasn't. This is... She couldn't find the words. Her brain had abandoned her, leaving only humiliation behind. The man stood perfectly still, the spilled champagne dripping slowly down the lapel of his suit, his hand still half raised, as if deciding whether to steady her again. He wasn't just handsome, he was unreal. High cheekbones, a jawline cut from marble, icy blue eyes framed by thick lashes, hair dark as midnight swept back with effortless precision. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine or a billionaire's profile in Forbes. No, scratch that. He looked like the reason the word devastatingly existed. And he was staring at her, not with annoyance, not with disbelief. No. His expression was something else entirely, something sharper, something curious. I've heard 100 apologies in my life, he said softly, voice smooth as aged whiskey, but none as sweet as yours. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She stepped back instinctively, heat rising in her cheeks. I should go get you something. It's fine, he said, but his eyes didn't move from her face. A strange, almost searching intensity glimmered there. Really? No harm done, no harm? She'd practically tackled him and now stood there looking like an idiot. She needed to escape before she humiliated herself further. really sorry," she whispered, and this time she managed to turn and walk away quickly. The crowd swallowed her, and she didn't dare look back. Her pulse throbbed in her throat, her hands shaking as she reached the far corner of the ballroom. She pressed her back to a column. Her lips still tingled from the accidental contact. "Get it together, Amara. He's just a man. A ridiculously gorgeous, probably rich, definitely unreachable man. One you will never see again." Except she would. Because the moment she disappeared into the crowd, the man in the Armani suit finally exhaled. Amara Collins. He murmured to himself. Her company ID had peeked out from the clutch she clutched, just long enough for his sharp eyes to catch. He hadn't meant to look, but he saw everything. And that name, it hit him like a fist. Memories crashed into him 4 years ago. A bridge. A moment of darkness so complete, he'd convinced himself the world had ended. A voice, soft but steady. A hand grabbing his sleeve. A stranger telling him he wasn't alone. A stranger he never saw clearly. Until tonight. Until lips brushed his, and those same warm brown eyes met his with the same unguarded tenderness he'd never forgotten. It was her. It had to be. But Amara didn't know any of this. While she hid behind a marble column trying to breathe normally, her world crashed inward again. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. "We need a decision about your mother's surgery. No more delays." Her stomach twisted painfully. She blinked back tears. Not here. Not in front of these people. She wiped her eyes, just as her supervisor called her over to introduce her to new VIP clients, the partners she had to impress if she wanted to survive her first year. She straightened, pulled on professionalism like armor, and walked toward them. What she didn't see was the man she'd collided with re-entering the ballroom now in a freshly changed suit. His expression, unreadable. Conversations hushed as he passed, people straightening involuntarily. The room responded to him like glass to pressure. A ripple went through the senior partners. One whispered, "Alexander King is here. Why didn't anyone tell us Alexander King?" The youngest self-made billionaire in New York. CEO of King Global, a global tech legal empire. The kind of man who could buy this entire building before breakfast and not notice the transaction. The kind of man who did not attend galas unless he had a reason. His reason was currently standing across the room, smoothing down her dress and trying desperately to look like she belonged. He watched her for a moment, noting the way her eyebrows drew together when she was nervous, how she seemed to shrink and expand at the same time, vulnerable, but trying so hard to be brave. He almost smiled. Almost. Then one of the partners waved him over, thrilled to have the elusive Alexander King at their event. Alex moved toward them with a controlled elegance, the crowd parting effortlessly. But Amara didn't notice him until the partner said her name. "This is Amara Collins' exceptional potential. Sharp mind. One of our promising new hires." She turned and her heart dropped straight to the floor. He stood before her once again, impossibly composed, despite their earlier collision. His eyes icy blue and impossibly intense, locked with hers. Recognition flared between them like a struck match, though for entirely different reasons. Her breath caught. His lips curved. The faintest ghost of a smirk. "We've met," said. His tone was polite, but only barely. Underneath it, Something darker flickered, something only she seemed to notice. She forced a tight smile. Briefly, briefly. He echoed, but his eyes didn't move from her. The partner, oblivious, clapped Alex on the shoulder. We're honored to have King Global consider collaborating with us. We're not considering, Alex said calmly. We've chosen. The partner brightened. Chosen. Yes. Alex's gaze slid back to Amara with deliberate slowness. Your firm will be representing us in the upcoming corporate acquisition. The room stirred astonishment, whispers, excitement. The partner nearly stumbled over his own words, thanking him. Amara, however, felt cold dread seep into her bones. She realized with a sickening twist she would see him again. A lot. Her accidental kiss, the humiliation she'd hoped to forget, was now tied to the most powerful client their firm had ever secured. But something in his eyes stopped her panic from fully forming. It wasn't mockery. It wasn't irritation. It was something deeper, sharper. As if he were remembering something she didn't. As if she were a puzzle piece he'd been searching for. Miss Collins, he said quietly, stepping closer. We'll be working together soon. Her pulse stuttered. Why me? His eyes softened. Just barely. Because sometimes, he murmured, a single moment tells you everything you need to know. Before she could ask what that meant, the music swelled and the crowd absorbed him. But not before he cast one last glance over his shoulder, one that made her heart race in a way she couldn't explain. Amara pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady herself. She didn't know it yet, but the kiss she'd spent the last 20 minutes wanting to forget was the very moment Alexander King had been waiting 4 years to remember. The next morning, Amara stood in the elevator with her coffee trembling slightly in her hand, replaying the gala disaster inside her head for the 100th time. Her lips still burned with the memory of the accidental brush against the stranger's mouth. Alex's mouth, though she refused to let herself think the name. That kind of man didn't linger in your memory. He walked across it, the way storms crossed oceans, leaving wreckage behind. She'd barely slept. Not only because of the humiliation, but because of the hospital's late-night message reminding her that decisions couldn't wait anymore. Her mother's condition was worsening. Her savings were a joke compared to the looming cost of the surgery. She hadn't told anyone at the firm. Not her colleagues, not her supervisor, not even Nora, her closest friend. Vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford here. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. She stepped into the polished hallway of Sterling and Pierce, clutching the folders against her chest as if they could shield her. Then she nearly dropped them when she saw the commotion. Partners rushing, assistants whispering, files being shuffled. Her supervisor, Mr. Langford, spotted her and waved frantically. Collins. In my office. Now. Great. First thing in the morning, and she was already in trouble. When she walked in, several partners were standing around the table, all wearing expressions that were a mix of panic and excitement, but none of it prepared her for the words that came next. King Global has signed with us, Langford announced. The room buzzed with pride. King Global, the untouchable empire of Alexander King, a company known for choosing only the fiercest, sharpest legal teams and discarding the rest. Amara swallowed. Hard. No way. No. No. There was no universal law cruel enough to throw him back into her life one day after she literally fell onto his face. Langford continued, and because Mr. King prefers a more streamlined communication channel, he's chosen one point of contact here. He paused for dramatic effect. Then he pointed directly at her. You. Her breath stopped. Me, that has to be a mistake. Another partner shook his head. He asked for you by name. She felt the room tilt, as if someone had pulled the ground from beneath her heels. She hadn't even told them about the gala. There was no reason, none, for Alexander King to remember her, let alone request her. Did he say why she managed? He said he was impressed with your composure last night. Her stomach twisted so violently she almost laughed. Composure. She had tripped, spilled champagne, and accidentally kissed him. If that was composure, then gravity owed her flowers. But the partners were beaming, and no one else in the room seemed to sense the danger she did the way her heart caught in her throat, warning her that this wasn't coincidence. It felt intentional. Too intentional. She stepped out of the office moments later, trying to inhale calmly, even though her lungs were refusing cooperation. She needed air. She needed Ms. Collins. Her heart stopped. That voice, smooth, low, expensive. She turned slowly, like someone about to confront a disaster she couldn't escape. There he was, Alexander King, standing in the middle of the firm's sleek lobby, as if he owned the oxygen. Sunlight from the tall windows spilled across him, lighting up his dark hair, highlighting the sharp cut of his suit, another impeccably tailored masterpiece, free of champagne stains this time. He looked even more dangerous in daylight, and he was staring right at her. His gaze moved over her with the same quiet intensity as last night, as if she were the only thing worth focusing on in a room filled with million-dollar cases. The employees around them tried to pretend they weren't watching, but their stolen glances gave them away. Amara cleared her throat, fighting to steady herself. Mr. King. Amara, he said softly. Not Miss Collins. Not Ms. Not formal. Not distant. Just her name. Spoken like a secret. A shiver traced her spine. I didn't expect to see you so soon. She lied. His lips curved just slightly. You did run away rather quickly last night. She nearly choked on her own breath. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. And you still make me lose focus, just as effectively as you did then. There it was, the line that threw her off balance, more than the collision itself. And he said it with no hesitation, no embarrassment, no apology. She forced her expression to stay neutral. I appreciate your confidence, but surely your company would prefer someone more experienced to manage your case. I choose people based on instinct. His eyes stayed on hers. And mine is rarely wrong. She opened her mouth, unsure if she intended to challenge him, or thank him, or simply ask him to stop looking at her like that, like she was somehow both familiar and new to him. Before she could speak, an assistant approached with a folder. Alex accepted it without looking away from her. Let's begin with the acquisition proposal this afternoon, he said. And, before you protest again, yes, I specifically requested you. Resistance is futile. She blinked, caught between indignation and a very dangerous warmth blooming somewhere beneath her ribs. It isn't resistance, she said carefully. It's practicality. Has practicality ever once changed your fate? He murmured. She stiffened. The word fate shouldn't have meant anything, but the way he said it, quiet, knowing, laced with something she couldn't quite decipher, made her feel exposed, as if he understood pieces of her she hadn't shown anyone. She swallowed hard. Mr. King, if this is about last night, it's not. He interrupted gently. But last night reminded me of something. Her heartbeat quickened. What? He held her gaze for a long, breathless moment. That sometimes we meet the right person at the wrong time. And if we're lucky, fate brings them back. She forgot how to breathe altogether. She wanted to ask him what he meant, what he remembered, what he thought he saw in her. But she also wanted to run again, because nothing about this man was safe. Not for her career, not for her heart. Somewhere inside her bag, her phone buzzed. The hospital. A reminder that she didn't have time for distractions, even ones who looked like Alexander King. She straightened herself. I'll prepare the documents for this afternoon. For the first time. A flicker of something like frustration or disappointment passed through his eyes, but only for a second. He nodded. I'll expect you in my office at 2. And then he walked away. The room clearing for him, like the tide parting around a stone. When he disappeared into the glass elevator, Amara finally exhaled, her pulse still racing. He remembered her. Not the kiss, not the embarrassment. Something else. Something that made him request her. Choose her. But fate, she told herself bitterly, was a luxury she couldn't afford to believe in. She had bills. She had an ill mother. She had a job to keep. And Alexander King had the power to destabilize all three without even trying. As she returned to her desk, she whispered to herself, "Keep your distance, Amara." But fate had already made its move. And fate, unlike Alexander King, didn't accept negotiations. By the time the sun dipped behind the Manhattan skyline, Amara felt like her entire day had been stretched thin and wrung out like wet cloth. Working alongside Alexander King, shadowing his meetings, exchanging case notes, feeling his gaze brush over her again and again, with an intensity she tried desperately to ignore, had left her nerves trembling. Not because he was difficult, on the contrary. He was almost disarmingly considerate toward her, listening to her thoughts with an attentiveness she wasn't used to. It was the way he looked at her that unsettled her, like he recognized something in her she didn't even recognize in herself. And beneath that gaze, she felt a pull she couldn't name, a pull she had no business feeling. She told herself it was just exhaustion, stress, distraction. Nothing more. She repeated that lie until she believed it enough to walk out of the firm with steady steps. But when she reached the hospital that evening, nothing inside her felt steady anymore. The antiseptic air wrapped around her like a warning. The soft beeping of monitors pierced her chest, the way no billionaire's gaze ever could. Her mother lay in the hospital bed, her breaths shallow, her skin almost translucent under the fluorescent lights. The nurse gently touched Amara's shoulder, voice soft but firm. The doctors need a decision soon. Amara nodded. Her voice failed her. The nurse left. and Amara sank into the chair beside her mother's bed, taking in every detail of the woman who had raised her alone, who had wiped her tears, who had worked double shifts to keep food on their table. Now Amara couldn't even keep her alive, without a miracle she didn't have. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from the tired forehead before her. "I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." Her phone buzzed again, another reminder of the cost of the surgery. $120,000. More than she had ever seen in one place. More than she could ever hope to gather in time. She pressed her palms to her eyes, fighting back tears. Her mother didn't deserve this, and she didn't deserve a daughter who couldn't save her. She stayed like that until the visiting hours were nearly over, clinging to her mother's hand, as if her grip alone could hold her to this world. When she finally left the room and walked toward the elevator, she expected silence. She expected emptiness. What she didn't expect was him. Alexander King stood at the end of the corridor, the dim hospital lights casting shadows across his sharp features, softening him in a way she had never seen. His presence here felt impossibly out of place, like a storm standing in a sanctuary. She stopped dead, heart stumbling painfully. "Mr. King." He didn't smile. His expression was unreadable, carefully held together, as if he was balancing something heavy inside himself. "Call me Alex," he said quietly. "Not here." Something in his tone made her throat tighten. "Why are you—" "I came to see you." The honesty in his voice disarmed her more than any charm he had displayed before. "At the firm. You were pale, distracted. I had a feeling something was wrong." Her breath hitched. No one ever paid that close attention to her. No one noticed when she fell apart quietly. But he had. She tried to steady herself, wrapping professionalism around her like a shield. "I appreciate the concern, but this is personal. I know." His eyes softened in a way that made her chest ache. "That's why I'm here." She looked away, unable to bear that tenderness from a man who shouldn't care. "I can't talk about this. You don't have to," he said, stepping closer. "Just listen." Something in his voice, something fragile under the strength, made her meet his eyes again. He exhaled slowly, as if revealing this cost him something. "My grandmother is dying." Amara blinked. The vulnerability in his expression startled her. I'm sorry." He nodded, jaw tight. "She raised me, protected me, loved me when no one else did. Her heart's failing, and she has one wish left." He paused, eyes darkening. "She wants to see me married before she goes." The words settled between them like heavy snow. Amara didn't understand at first why he was telling her this. Then he spoke the words that shattered the air around her. "I want you to marry me." Her heart stopped. "What?" His voice didn't waver. "Marry me for 2 years. In return, your mother will receive the best medical care money can buy. Tonight." She stared at him, stunned, frozen. His expression remained calm, but his eyes held something raw, fear of losing the only family he had left. "Amara," he said, softer now. "I'm offering you $5 million, enough to save your mother. Enough to protect your future. Her pulse hammered painfully. $5 million. She couldn't breathe. Why me? The question escaped before she could stop it. Because I trust you. The answer came too quickly. Too sure. You don't know me. A faint, unreadable smile touched his lips. Don't I? She swallowed hard. Everything felt unreal. Impossible. Dangerous. This is insane. Maybe. His eyes held hers, with quiet intensity. But it gives you what you need, and it gives me something money can't buy. She dared to ask. And what's that? My grandmother's peace. Silence filled the hallway, thick and suffocating. He stepped closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from him, until his voice dropped to something almost gentle. I'm not asking you for love. I'm not asking you to give up your life. I'm asking for time. 2 years, appearances, a marriage on paper. She shook her head, dazed, and feelings. His breath caught barely. Feelings, he said carefully, are optional for you. He held her gaze. Not for me. Her heartbeat stuttered. For a moment. She couldn't speak. Couldn't think. Her world had been falling apart for months. And now, suddenly, someone was handing her a lifeline made of gold and danger, and promises she didn't know how to hold. Think about it, he whispered. But not for long. He looked past her, toward her mother's room. She doesn't have the time. And then he walked away, leaving her alone with the weight of a choice she never imagined she'd face. That night, she sat beside her mother again, holding her hand and watching the rise and fall of her chest. Every breath seemed weaker than the last. Amara pressed her forehead to the back of her mother's hand. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Tell me what to do. But the room stayed silent, and silence felt like suffocation. There were decisions that shaped a life, and then there were decisions that shaped a soul. This felt like both. She thought of Alex's eyes, earnest, vulnerable in a way she didn't understand. She thought of the way he had said he trusted her. She thought of her mother, trapped in a body that was giving up too fast. She thought of the bills, the deadlines, the fear. By dawn, the decision had carved itself into her bones. She found Alex waiting in the hospital lobby, as if he had known she would come, as if he had waited all night. His expression softened when their eyes met, but he didn't speak. He let her cross the distance, let her choose. She stood before him, her voice barely holding. I'll do it. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, relief, gratitude. Something else she couldn't decipher. She forced herself to continue. But understand this, it's just a contract. His gaze deepened, like he saw more than she wanted him to. You can begin with a contract, he murmured. But He paused, the faintest hint of truth slipping through. I'm not sure I can. And in that moment, without ceremony or witnesses, fate sealed something between them that neither of them fully understood yet, but both would be unable to escape. The elevator ride to the 73rd floor was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery and the frantic beat of Amara's heart. She kept telling herself this was just an arrangement, a transaction with a timeline, rules, boundaries. But every time she glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw Alexander King standing beside her, tall, and impossibly collected. She felt the edges of that logic blur. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse so vast, it seemed more like a suspended world than an apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space like crystal walls, exposing all of Manhattan, glittering beneath them. The city stretched endlessly, but somehow, the room felt cold, too immaculate, like a place designed to be admired, not lived in. Alex watched her reaction quietly. "If there's anything you want changed, tell me," he said, voice low. This place hasn't felt like home for a long time. She didn't ask why. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. The first few days settled into a rhythm of polite distance. He rose early, disappearing into meetings before dawn. She left for the firm shortly after, keeping their interactions brief and careful, both of them moving around each other like two people afraid of waking a sleeping beast. They ate in the same room, but never at the same time. They exchanged civil words that always stopped just short of personal. But even in the distance, Alex's attention to her was unmistakable. On the fourth night, she returned from work shivering. Autumn rain had soaked her shoes. When she stepped into the penthouse, she found a mug of ginger tea waiting on the counter, steam curling upward like a whisper. She blinked, confused, until his voice came from behind her. "You get cold easily." She nearly dropped her bag. How did you? You were rubbing your arms all afternoon during the meeting," he said simply, as if observing her that closely was nothing unusual. "Drink it. It helps." His tone wasn't soft. It wasn't warm. But the gesture settled under her skin like quiet warmth, one she couldn't shake even when she went to bed hours later, sipping the tea slowly, savoring a kindness she hadn't expected. The next night she found another mug, and another the night after, without asking, without explaining. He simply made it part of their routine, as if he'd silently decided she needed something gentle in a world that had given her too much hard. Soon, tiny shifts began to happen. When she cooked simple dinners, mostly to ease her own stress, he'd drift into the kitchen under the pretense of checking messages, but inevitably ended up chopping vegetables beside her. Sleeves rolled, expression frustratingly unreadable. "You don't have to help," she said once. "I know," he replied, but he stayed anyway. They talked about small things at first: music, travel, the absurd emails they both received during their workdays. Gradually, the conversations deepened. They cooked while listening to old jazz records Alex kept tucked away in a drawer, the warm brass notes somehow softening the sharp lines of his face. She told him about her mother, about her childhood, about growing up in a neighborhood where dreams always felt slightly too expensive. And he told her quietly, slowly, about the loneliness of being raised by someone who loved him deeply, but spent her entire life protecting him from the world rather than letting him touch it. Yet for all the closeness blooming between them, something darker hovered beneath Alex's calm exterior, a restlessness, a tension. The first time she heard him pacing in the middle of the night steps, long and sharp, across the quiet penthouse, she hesitated, then rose from her bed and stepped into the living room. He stood by the window, staring at the city like it was a battlefield he couldn't leave behind. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He didn't turn. "I don't sleep well." "Insomnia," he exhaled, sounding almost surprised she'd noticed. "Something like that." She stepped closer, careful not to intrude. Want to talk about it? He shook his head. Talking doesn't change it, but it might help. He finally looked at her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. You shouldn't worry about me. Maybe I want to, she said before she could stop herself. The silence that followed felt electric. He didn't reach for her, didn't move an inch. But something in the air shifted something deep, unspoken. Go back to sleep. Amara, he murmured, though his voice sounded strained. But she didn't. Instead, she sat on the couch and began reading cases on her laptop, pretending she had work to finish, but staying for one reason only, so he wouldn't be alone in the dark. And when she woke hours later, her laptop resting on her lap, she found him asleep on the opposite end of the couch, his breathing finally steady. They never spoke of it. But after that night, he slept a little more, and she pretended not to notice. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back client calls, he joined her in the kitchen again. But something in his shoulders was different, tighter, more worn. Rough day, she asked. They're all rough, he said. But then he glanced at her, something unguarded flickering in his expression. But this is better. She didn't know what this meant exactly, cooking beside her, the soft jazz crackling in the background, or simply being near someone who didn't expect him to be indestructible, but her chest tightened all the same. She smiled, handing him a cutting board. Help me not burn the pasta then. He smirked softly, the closest she'd seen to a real smile. Deal. But fate had a way of testing fragile things. A week later, Amara stayed up late studying a particularly difficult brief. Hours passed unnoticed until her head began to throb and her skin turned clammy. She tried to stand, but the room tilted violently. Her breath hitched. Darkness swam at the edges of her vision. She barely managed a whisper of his name before her body gave out. Everything blurred. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't on the cold floor of her study. She was weightless, held firmly against warmth and strength. Alex's arms were around her, tense as iron, his heartbeat racing wildly beneath her cheek. Don't. His voice cracked, not cold, not controlled, but shaken. Don't ever scare me like that again. She tried to speak, but his grip tightened just enough to silence her. He carried her to her room with surprising gentleness, laying her down as if she were made of something fragile. His hand brushed her forehead, cursing under his breath when he felt the heat. Fever. High. He vanished for a moment, returning with medicine, a damp cloth, water, everything she needed before she knew she needed it. When he sat beside her, his hand lingered at her temple, thumb tracing her skin with a tenderness she had no defenses against. She shivered, not from fever this time, but from the warmth of his breath brushing her cheek as he leaned closer. You work yourself to exhaustion, he murmured, voice trembling. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? Because I have to, she whispered. I have people who need me. He swallowed hard. I need you too. The words slipped out before he could stop them, for a heartbeat. Neither of them breathed. Then his expression folded pain, fear, longing, all tangled into one. Sleep. Amara, he whispered, brushing a curl from her forehead. Please, let me take care of you tonight. She drifted into sleep to the sound of his voice, a voice that was firm with the world, but devastatingly fragile with her. And long after her breathing evened out, he stayed, watching, protecting. The distance between them, once so carefully maintained, had finally cracked. And something unstoppable was beginning to grow through the fracture. Night wrapped itself around the penthouse like velvet, deep and quiet, broken only by the soft hum of the city far below. Amara woke before dawn, her fever broken, her body still heavy, but finally breathing freely. For a moment she wasn't sure where she was, until the faint scent of ginger and the softness of the blanket tucked carefully around her reminded her she hadn't been alone. Memories flickered Alex's arms, lifting her from the floor. The tremor in his voice, the gentleness in his hands. She pressed a hand to her forehead, not because it hurt, but because something inside her did something she had been trying to ignore since the moment she met him. She pushed herself up slowly and stepped into the hallway. She didn't expect to find him awake, but he was. Alex sat on the edge of the terrace. The glass doors cracked open to let in the cold wind. His posture was rigid, elbows braced on his knees, fingers laced so tightly his knuckles were white. The city lights painted harsh glimmers across his face, revealing exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. She approached quietly, but he didn't turn. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice still hoarse. He inhaled slowly. "I don't sleep much." "Because of work?" He hesitated. "Because of memories." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. Memories of what? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he exhaled a sound between surrender and confession. "There's something I never told you." She lowered herself beside him, close enough to feel the cold air radiating from the open terrace, but not close enough to touch him. He finally lifted his gaze toward the city, his voice low and steady, as if he'd rehearsed these words for years. 4 years ago, I was in an accident, a bad one. I lost my sight temporarily, and everything else permanently." She blinked. "You never mentioned—" "I don't talk about it." His jaw flexed. "There are days I barely think about it. And then there are nights like this, when the memory claws back with teeth." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if steadying himself. "The night after the surgery failed, I broke. I felt like the world had turned its back on me, like I was trapped in a darkness no one could pull me out of." His voice grew quieter. "I went to the Brooklyn Bridge, not to admire the view." Amara's blood ran cold. She didn't speak, afraid any sound might break him. The wind outside howled softly. "I stood there for a long time," he continued, thinking that maybe the water below would be easier than the life ahead. No sight, no future, no purpose, just noise and pain. Her breath hitched, but she forced herself to stay silent. And then, he murmured, "Someone grabbed my arm." Amara's heart slammed once, hard. "A voice," he said, almost in a whisper, soft, but strong, impossible to ignore. "She told me that as long as I was alive, there was hope. That the darkness I was drowning in wasn't permanent. That even if I couldn't see the world then, the world wasn't done letting me see it." He looked down at his hands, as though seeing memories carved into his skin. "I never saw her face. Not clearly, but I saw her eyes. warm, brown, a shade that didn't belong to the night. He swallowed. Before I could even thank her, she was gone, like she'd just been sent there long enough to keep me alive. Amara felt the world shift beneath her. She had known someone on that bridge. A broken man she had talked down from the ledge before running back to the hospital, where she'd just learned her father wouldn't survive. Her heart began pounding so loudly, she was afraid Alex could hear it. "I searched for her for years," he said, voice trembling with the weight of those years. "My grandmother used to say, we meet the people who save us, without knowing we needed saving. I didn't believe her until that night." He finally turned his head, and the look in his eyes nearly undid her. Raw, open, terrified, hopeful. And then he whispered, "You ran into me at that gala. Your voice, your eyes." His breath faltered. "I knew. God, Amara, I just knew." Her vision blurred with tears she didn't mean to shed. "Alex, it was you," he said, voice breaking. "It was always you." Her chest cracked open. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat, overwhelmed by the tidal wave of emotion crashing inside her. She remembered the bridge, the cold wind, the sound of a man's restrained sob. She had spoken to him because she couldn't bear to see another life fall apart like hers had that night. She had walked away not knowing she had changed anything, but she had saved him. And now he was sitting beside her, looking at her as if she held the map to every lost part of him. Tears fell before she could stop them. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You lived because you were strong enough to keep living." He shook his head, his palms curling. "I lived because of you." The words landed like a blow, powerful and gentle all at once. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the back of his hand. He didn't move away. If anything, he leaned into the touch, as if it anchored him. "I found a reason to keep fighting that night," he said, his voice rough. "And I promised myself that if I ever met you again, if fate ever gave me a second chance, I'd spend my life protecting the person who saved mine." Her breath trembled. "Alex, you're not just part of my past," he said. "You're the moment everything changed." She closed her eyes as new tears slipped free, not from sadness, but from a tenderness so fierce it scared her. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know it was you. But I knew," he murmured. "Every time you walk into a room, every time you look at me, it feels like that night again. Like the world isn't done giving me reasons to stay." She swiped at her tears, but more fell, unstoppable. He reached for her then, his thumb brushing gently along her cheek, catching the tears as if he couldn't bear to let them fall. "Amara," he said softly, "you saved me once." His thumb lingered, trembling slightly. "Let me save you now." A sob escaped her, quiet and broken. She leaned into his palm, overwhelmed by the weight of everything he had carried alone, everything he was now placing gently into her hands. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." His eyes closed as if her words were a balm he hadn't known he needed. "Neither am I," he breathed. "Not anymore." In the quiet glow of city lights, with the past finally laid bare between them, the distance they had both pretended still existed dissolved completely, leaving only truth and the fragile, powerful beginning of something neither of them could walk away from now. The morning the storm began felt deceptively ordinary. Amara woke to the faint warmth of sunlight slipping through the penthouse curtains, the scent of ginger tea wafting from the kitchen, and the quiet knowledge that Alex had stayed beside her longer than he should have last night. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter, as if the confession on the terrace had untangled something inside both of them. She brushed her fingers against the spot on her cheek, where his thumb had lingered, her heart fluttering with a softness she didn't quite know what to do with. She dressed for work with a strange mixture of calm and anticipation. The memory of his voice, "I lived because of you," still echoing through her chest. But the elevator ride down felt different. People stared, whispered. One woman's eyes darted to her, then away, as if afraid of being caught, knowing something she shouldn't. Amara felt her stomach tighten, a faint warning whisper threading through her nerves. She ignored it. She didn't want to start the day with paranoia. But when she stepped into the firm, every conversation seemed to halt abruptly. Throats cleared, papers shuffled too quickly. Someone murmured her name, followed by a sharp, incredulous laugh. Her pulse flickered uneasily. She walked faster toward her office, determined not to let the sudden shift in atmosphere break her. But then Nora rushed toward her, pale and breathless. "Amara, don't open the news." "Why?" "Just don't." Not yet. Too late. A dozen screens across the office flashed headlines in bold, merciless fonts. King Global CEO in secret relationship with junior lawyer. Amara Collins. Seduction. Manipulation. Or career strategy pregnant and promoted. Is Alexander King being blackmailed? The articles multiplied before her eyes like poison blooming in water. Photos of her leaving the office late at night, blurred shots taken from across the street. A picture of her entering the hospital with Alex beside her. A video clip of them together in the firm hallway. Edited. Twisted. Weaponized. Her head spun. What is this?" she whispered. Nora grabbed her arm. "Vivian Hale. It has to be her. She's been sniffing around for weeks." The name sank like cold metal in Amara's stomach. Vivian, the elegant, calculating heiress who had hovered around Alex during every industry event. Always with a smile too sharp to be genuine. Vivian, who once watched Amara with an expression like someone inspecting a stain on silk. She spread this. Amara breathed. But how Nora cut in. "She's wealthy, connected, and she hates you." The room tilted again as another notification flashed. King Global stock drops 8% within hours. Her vision blurred. "Oh God, you need to call Alex," Nora urged. But Amara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Her phone began vibrating dozens of missed calls. Partners, colleagues, unknown numbers, reporters. The walls began closing in. She stumbled backward toward her office, trying desperately to compose herself. But before she reached the door, a firm hand closed around her arm. Not cruel, but authoritative enough to halt her mid-step. "Miss Collins." "Mr. Langford said tightly, "The board wants to see you. Now." His face was grim, his eyes cold in a way that made her heart plummet. "Sir, I save it. We need damage control, not excuses." She flinched. I didn't do anything. Intent doesn't matter. Perception does. His words hit her like a slap. Amara followed him down the hall, her ankles suddenly leaden, her mind spinning with questions she had no answers for. They entered a conference room filled with senior partners and board members, all wearing expressions that ranged from frustration to outrage. One woman tapped the screen where the headlines blazed. "You seduced a client." A man beside her added, "You used your relationship with Mr. King to advance at this firm. You have compromised us." Another accused, "You will be placed on leave until we determine." The door slammed open. Everyone froze. Alex stood in the doorway like the eye of a storm still, composed, terrifyingly controlled. His gaze swept over the room once before landing on Amara. His eyes softened instantly, then sharpened again as he turned to face the board. "This meeting ends now, Mr. King." One partner sputtered, "Your company is under scrutiny. We must address. You will not address anything without me present." His voice cut through the room like a blade. "Because these accusations involve my wife." Gasps erupted. Someone choked. Someone else dropped a pen. Alex stepped closer to Amara, placing himself between her and the table of scowling partners, like a shield. "And let me make something unequivocally clear," he said, voice steady as thunder. "No one touches her." A man at the head of the table attempted, "You can't dictate our internal decisions." "I can," Alex said calmly, "and I will. If one more word is spoken against my wife, King Global will withdraw every partnership from this firm, effective immediately." Silence fell so thick, it felt suffocating. Alex reached for Amara's hand, not timidly, not cautiously, but with absolute certainty, as if daring anyone in the room to question it. Her fingers trembled in his, but his grip remained steady, strong, unshakable. "If someone must take responsibility," he continued, "it will be me, not her." "This is absurd," another board member protested. "Your involvement with a subordinate is legal," Alex interrupted. "Audited, documented. Public record will confirm it." "Public record," someone repeated. Alex's eyes glinted coldly. "I'm making a statement in 20 minutes. Alarm flickered across the room. "Alex, you all have exactly one option," he said, voice quiet but lethal. "Stand down." No one argued after that, not because they agreed, but because challenging a king in his own empire was a fool's game. Alex led Amara out of the room without looking back. As soon as the doors shut behind them, the noise of the firm blurred into nothing. She finally found her voice. "Alex, you didn't have to do that." He turned to her, jaw tense with emotion he wasn't hiding well. "Yes," he said softly, "I did." Her throat tightened. "This is my fault." "No," he said firmly. "This is Vivian." The name felt like a spark against gasoline, and Amara winced. "She knows about the contract." His expression grew darker. "She's been watching me for years, hoping, expecting." Amara swallowed hard. "And now she's punishing me for being the one you chose." That flicker of pain in her voice nearly undid him. His tone softened. "I chose you long before she ever knew your name, before she could process the weight of that." His phone buzzed. His assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Sir, the press is gathering outside. They want statements from you. And from Mrs. King." The title made Amara's breath hitch. Alex squeezed her hand. "You don't have to say a word," he murmured. "I'll handle this." She nodded even though her chest was tightening with dread. Minutes later, they stepped outside into a wall of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Paparazzi surged forward. Microphones jutted toward their faces. Rumors buzzed like hornets. "Alex, did she seduce you? Is she pregnant? Did she manipulate her way into your firm?" Amara flinched. Alex instantly pulled her close, his arm firm around her waist. Then, with the eyes of the world on him, he spoke. "My wife," he said clearly, "is not a rumor. She is not a scandal. She is not a stepping stone. She is the woman I chose, the woman I married. And anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." Cameras flashed wildly. His fingers moved to intertwine with hers, slow, deliberate, undeniably intimate. "She is my partner," he continued, "my equal, my family, and I will protect her with everything I have." Her heart shattered open in front of millions of watching eyes. He had chosen her, not because of a contract, not because he had to, because he wanted to, because she mattered to him far more than appearances or reputation. That truth struck her so deeply, she barely felt the cold air against her skin. Hours later, evidence surfaced exposing Vivian's bribery of reporters, her fabricated stories, her calculated attempts to sabotage Amara. Public backlash was swift. Investors withdrew support from her family's company. Her perfectly curated image cracked beneath the weight of her own cruelty. By evening, the storm had begun to fade. The articles were retracted. The firm issued a formal apology. King Global stabilized. Vivian disappeared from the public eye. But inside the penthouse, Amara sat curled on the sofa, staring at her hands as if they no longer belonged to her. Relief didn't come. Instead, a quiet ache settled deep in her chest. Alex found her there, sitting alone in the dark. He approached slowly, kneeling in front of her as if afraid to break whatever fragile thing she was holding on to. "Talk to me," he murmured. She shook her head. "I didn't ask for any of this. I know. And now the whole world thinks I'm—" Her voice cracked. "Thinks I used you. Let them think what they want," he said gently. "I know the truth." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Alex, you put everything on the line today." He exhaled softly, brushing a thumb along her cheek. "You're worth it." Her heart stuttered painfully, and for the first time, she wondered if the storm outside had only been a shadow of the larger one forming quietly inside her, one that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the man kneeling before her. The world had calmed, but her heart had not, because now she wasn't just bound to him by a contract or circumstance. She was bound by something far more dangerous, something she was no longer sure she could resist. The storm outside had passed, but inside the penthouse, an even quieter, more treacherous storm had begun to take shape, one that neither headlines nor public statements could soothe. Amara could feel it growing in the silence between her and Alex, in the way he watched her, as if afraid she might disappear, and in the way her heart reacted every time he drew close. It terrified her, because for the first time since signing that contract, she wasn't sure where the paperwork ended and where her feelings began, or his. And that uncertainty, God, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with nothing but hope to keep her from falling. One late evening, while Alex was still at the office handling the remnants of the media fallout, Amara sat alone in his study, organizing documents the firm had sent over. She wasn't looking for anything personal. She wasn't snooping. She merely wanted to help because she needed to feel useful, needed to feel like she wasn't just the center of a scandal he had cleaned up. But when a folder slipped from the stack and tumbled open across the desk, papers scattered like feathers on the wind, and one page slid to a stop in front of her. A clause she didn't remember signing, a line she hadn't seen before. Termination of personal obligation after 24 months. She froze. At first, she thought she was misreading it. She scanned the page again, her heartbeat stumbling. The contract had always been clear, marriage for 2 years. But she'd believed, naively, foolishly, that somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred for both of them. She believed the ginger tea, the nights on the terrace, the whispered confessions, the way he held her as if she were the last solid thing in his world. All of it had meant something beyond obligation. But this clause, the cold, clinical language, felt like ice against her skin. 24 months. Then everything ended. Everything reverted. Everything she felt became nothing. Her breath caught. She tried to tell herself it was just legal protection, a leftover term, a necessary boundary. But the words carved themselves deeper and deeper into her mind until they became a verdict she could no longer deny. Maybe she had misread him. Maybe she had mistaken gratitude for affection. Maybe she had been foolish to think she mattered beyond what she had done for him that night on the bridge. Her chest tightened painfully. She sank into the chair, her trembling fingers clutching the page as though it might crush her back. She didn't hear the elevator, didn't realize Alex had returned until he stepped into the study doorway and saw her pale, frozen form surrounded by scattered documents. His expression shifted instantly from curiosity to concern to fear. "Amara," he said quietly, "what's wrong?" She looked up at him with eyes that felt too full, too heavy. She held out the paper, her voice barely a whisper. "You still see this as a contract?" He frowned, stepping forward. "What are you talking about?" "This," she choked out. "The clause. Obligation ends after 24 months. You planned for an ending." The words trembled. "I didn't know you were still counting down." Realization flickered in his eyes. "Amara, you're the one who told me feelings weren't required," she said, her voice breaking. "And I believed you when you told me they were optional. But then you treated me like I mattered, like I was more than something you hired." His jaw tensed, anguish breaking through his composure. "Because you are?" She shook her head, tears forming despite her attempts to blink them away. "I thought maybe this had turned into something real between us. But you still kept this. You still planned the exit from the very beginning." He stepped closer, the air vibrating with urgency. "Amara, listen." "No," she whispered, stepping back. If you wanted this to mean more, you would have told me. You would have taken this out. You would have said something before I found it. Because I didn't think you were ready. He shot back, pain twisting his voice. I didn't want to trap you. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. That clause is for you, not for me. Her throat clenched. Don't twist this. His voice cracked something she had never heard from him. You think I did all this because of a contract? He shook his head slowly, heartbreakingly. I did everything because it's you. It's always been you. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the sharp, unforgiving ache spreading through her chest. Alex, I don't want to be bound to you by paperwork. She held out her shaking hand and slowly slid the ring from her finger. Her vision blurred. And I don't want to stay here believing something you're not ready to say. His breath left him like a blow. Amara, don't. The word was raw, desperate. She placed the ring on the desk. I can't do this. The silence that followed was suffocating, stretching between them like a chasm neither knew how to cross. Alex reached for her, his composure shattering as he whispered, Please just stay. We can talk. We can fix this. But she shook her head, tears falling now. I can't stay here wondering if I'm the only one who feels this. He stepped closer, his voice trembling with a kind of helplessness she had never imagined him capable of. You aren't? Then why didn't you tell me? She whispered. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, because he knew. Deep down, words wouldn't erase the doubt the contract had carved into her heart. Amara turned away. Alex moved as if to follow. But something in her posture, something final, stopped him in place. He watched her walk to the elevator, watched her press the button with shaking fingers, watched the doors close between them with a soft, metallic sigh that sounded like a wound tearing open. She left the penthouse with one suitcase and a heart that felt too heavy to carry. He stood in the empty living room long after she'd gone, staring at the ring on his desk, at the imprint it left on the wood, at the space she had occupied in his life now echoing with silence. When he finally moved, it was only to collapse into the chair she'd been sitting in moments before. Pressing his palms to his eyes, as if he could physically force back the devastation choking him, Amara returned to her tiny apartment, the one she'd fought so hard to escape, and found it unchanged. But she wasn't. She dropped her suitcase by the door and let herself slide to the floor, pressing her hand to her chest, willing her heart to be quiet. It refused. And yet she stayed. For nights. For weeks. During those nights, Alex came. He stood outside her building, hands in his pockets, looking up at her darkened window with a kind of silent desperation that shattered her every time she peeked through the curtain. He never knocked, never called up to her, never demanded anything. He just waited, hoping, hurting. A man who once stood on the edge of a bridge now stood outside her door, terrified of losing the one person who pulled him back from darkness twice. And every night, Amara stood inside her apartment, her forehead pressed to the cold glass, whispering to herself, "Don't go down. Don't make it harder. Don't let him break you again." But her heart whispered something far more dangerous. He didn't break you. You broke yourself, because you walked away from the one person who chose you long before you chose him. and fate, watching from the shadows, waited for the moment their paths would collide once more. Winter sunlight barely touched the city, the day everything came undone. The sky hung low and gray, thick with the kind of heaviness Amara felt every time she looked out the window of her apartment, avoiding the reflection of her hollow eyes. Weeks had passed since she left Alex. Weeks of silence between them that hurt worse than any headline ever had. She kept telling herself the distance was necessary, that she needed to breathe, to think, to protect herself. But each night when she lay awake, she realized that all she had done was carve a space inside her chest, large enough for regret to echo endlessly. She didn't know that Alex still came to her street, always standing just far enough away not to pressure her, always watching the window he hoped she would appear at. She never did. It was the one cruelty she allowed herself. The snow had just started to fall when the knock came. Not hesitant, not polite, sharp, urgent, wrong. Amara froze mid-step. No one visited her here. Her breath clouded in the cold air as she approached the door, caution prickling along her spine. When she opened it, the hallway lights flickered, and Vivian Hale stepped inside, uninvited, her elegance fractured, eyes wild, hair tangled as if she'd torn her hands through it repeatedly. She looked nothing like the polished socialite the world adored. She looked like something broken, something desperate, something dangerous. "You," Amara managed, voice catching. "What are you doing here?" Vivian shut the door slowly, her lips twisting into something between a smile and a snarl. "I came to finish what everyone else was too afraid to do." A chill crawled down Amara's arms. "Vivian, I don't want any trouble." "Oh, but you already caused it." Vivian stepped closer, heels tapping like a countdown. "You ruined everything. Do you know that 4 years I waited for him? 4 years I built a life around the idea that Alex would eventually realize I was the one who belonged beside him. And then you..." Her voice broke, sharp as glass. "You show up, and suddenly, he only sees you." Amara backed away slowly, pulse racing. "Vivian, Alex and I, our situation isn't what you think." "Oh, I know exactly what it is." Vivian's laughter cracked. "A contract. A pathetic little arrangement he only made so he could keep you close without admitting it." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. Vivian's smile widened. "Yes, I know. I know everything. Amara." She took another step, voice dropping into something feverish. "I tried to warn him. That girl from the bridge, she was a ghost, a fantasy, nothing more, until he found you. And then, the moment he saw your eyes, he knew." Amara's breath caught painfully. Vivian's voice shook with fury. "He loved you long before he could admit it, and I knew I could never compete with that." She leaned in, her whisper ice cold. "That is why I had to break you." Amara stumbled back, horror rising. Vivian's smile was brittle. The rumors, the reporters, the attack in the parking garage. Amara's body went rigid. No. She'd suspected someone had been following her that night months ago, that the man who grabbed her wrist had come out of nowhere and disappeared just as fast. Vivian tilted her head. "Yes, sweetheart, that was me. Or rather, someone I paid." Imagine my surprise when you survived everything, and Alex still chose you over his entire empire. Amara felt nausea twist her stomach. Why are you telling me this? Vivian's eyes glinted. Because I'm tired. Amara. Tired of pretending I'm sane. Tired of watching him wait outside your door like some tragic hero. Tired of knowing he'll never look at me the way he looks at you. She reached into her coat. Something metallic glinted. Amara froze. Vivian's voice dropped into a tremor. If I can't have a future with him, then neither can you. The world snapped into terrifying clarity. Amara lunged backward, heart slamming painfully in her chest, just as the door burst open behind her. Alex. He moved faster than her mind could register. His expression a mix of terror and fury she had never seen on him before. Amara, he shouted, and in the same instant, Vivian lunged. A flash of steel, a choked gasp, a sickening sound as momentum collided with flesh. Alex's body jerked once. Then again, time shattered. Amara screamed, catching him as he collapsed against her. His weight heavy, too heavy. Her hands pressed against his side, coming away wet and warm. No, she whispered, voice breaking, shaking, disbelieving. No. No, Alex. Look at me. His breath trembled, uneven, slipping between his lips, like his strength was leaking out of him, and she couldn't hold enough of it in her shaking hands. Amara. His voice was barely sound. She cupped his face, panic rising so violently it clawed up her throat. Stay with me. Stay with me. Please, just keep your eyes open. Vivian screamed as officers tackled her outside the doorway, her voice a twisted blend of rage and hysteria. But Amara barely heard it through the ringing in her ears. All she saw was Alex pale, breath shallow, eyes locked onto hers with a tenderness that broke her completely. You promised, she sobbed, her forehead pressing against his as her tears fell onto his cheeks. You promised you wouldn't leave me. You can't do this. Alex, you can't. His fingers brushed her jaw weakly, his touch barely there. Amara, don't cry. How can I not? She whispered, voice splintered. You're bleeding. You're... His lips curved faintly, heartbreakingly, as if even now he found her fear beautiful. I was going to ask you. A cough interrupted him, crimson at the corner of his mouth. Amara shook her head violently. Don't talk. Save your strength, please. But Alex's eyes softened. I still owe you. A second proposal. Something inside her shattered so loudly, she felt the echo in her bones. Alex. Stop. Don't say things like that. Don't you dare make this sound like goodbye. Not goodbye, he murmured, breathing growing thinner. Never. Goodbye. His hand slipped from her cheek. Panic exploded in her chest. Alex, she screamed, pulling him closer as paramedics rushed into the apartment. Alex, stay with me, please. I'm right here. Don't you leave me. They pried him from her arms with practiced urgency. She fought them, her sobs tearing through the air until someone held her back so they could work. Sirens wailed outside. Officers dragged Vivian away, her screams fading beneath the weight of handcuffs and consequences. Amara stumbled into the hallway, her knees buckling as she watched the paramedics lift Alex onto the stretcher, blood staining the blanket beneath him like a cruel omen. He was still conscious barely, but he searched for her instantly, his gaze frantic until it found hers. She rushed to him, grabbing his hand, pressing it to her heart. "I'm here," she whispered fiercely. "I'm here. I'm not leaving. Just hold on." His fingers curled weakly around hers. No strength, only intention, only love. They burst out of the building into the freezing air as snow fell around them, like silent ash. Amara climbed into the ambulance without asking permission, never letting go of his hand, even as machines beeped frantically around him. When the doors slammed shut, she whispered through trembling breaths, "You stay alive. Alex King, you hear me? You come back to me." He blinked slowly, eyes fighting the weight pulling them down. Always. Then the light swallowed him, and the ambulance sped into the night, carrying the man she loved toward an operating room while she clung to his fading warmth, praying that fate wouldn't dare take him from her now. The world came back to Alex in fragments light, then shadow, then the faint antiseptic scent of a hospital room. But before any of it made sense, before he could place where he was or why his chest burned like fire, he felt warmth. A small, trembling warmth curled against his palm. He opened his eyes fully then, fighting through the heavy fog in his mind, and the sight that greeted him nearly unraveled him. Amara, sitting with her head resting on the edge of the bed, her curls spilling across the white sheets like spilled ink, her fingers intertwined with his as if she had been holding on for dear life. She looked exhausted, more than exhausted. There was a faint smudge of mascara beneath her eyes, and her shoulders were slumped as though she had carried the weight of the entire world on her back. The last thing he remembered was pain, bright, blinding pain. Amara screaming his name, her hands covered in his blood. And then, darkness. But she was here, and her touch anchored him in a way nothing else ever had. Slowly, with effort that cost more than he wanted to show, he let his free hand drift upward until his fingertips brushed her cheek. She stirred immediately, inhaling sharply, and her eyes flew open. "Alex," her voice cracked like something fragile snapping back into place. And despite the dryness in his throat, despite the bruising ache of his body, he managed a faint, crooked smile. "Still here," he murmured, the sound thin but alive. Tears filled her eyes instantly, tears she didn't bother to hide this time. She leaned closer, her forehead touching his, her fingers tightening around his hand, as if afraid he would vanish again. "You scared me," she whispered, her breath trembling. "You terrified me." He exhaled softly, the corners of his mouth lifting with a tenderness he couldn't contain. "You kept me alive," he said, his thumb brushing the trail of a tear. "You always do." She closed her eyes, letting the truth of that sink in, letting it soften all the bruised pieces of her heart. He studied her for a long moment, taking in every detail. He had nearly lost her warmth, her steadiness, the way her presence felt like a heartbeat pulled into human shape. "Amara," he whispered. She opened her eyes. Something shifted in his expression, then something steady, certain, fragile and fierce all at once. The contract between us. His breath wavered, but his voice didn't. Is over. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her heart stuttered painfully, but before fear could twist itself into meaning, he continued. No more terms, no more conditions, no more countdowns. His fingers brushed her jaw, gentle and reverent. From now on, it's only love. The words hit her with the force of a tidal wave, stripping away the last remnants of doubt she had carried since the day she left him. Her breath hitched. Alex, let me finish, he whispered, and she fell silent, her heart pounding, her vision blurring with emotion. He shifted, pushing himself upright despite the protest of his injured body. She tried to steady him, but he shook his head. I need to do this properly. And then, with a determination she had only ever seen when he was fighting for something that mattered, Alex swung his legs over the edge of the bed. Pain rippled through him, but he pushed through it. For her. Always for her. Slowly. Shakily. He sank to one knee beside the hospital bed, still holding her hand as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Her breath fled her chest. Alex, what are you doing? He reached into the drawer he had insisted the nurses leave untouched, and when he opened his hand, a ring glinted in the soft hospital light, a simple, elegant band with a single diamond that sparkled like a captured star. Her eyes widened, tears spilling freely now. You've had that this whole time. He gave a faint, breathless laugh. Longer than you think. He took her hand gently, lifting it as though it were something rare, precious, irreplaceable. Amara Collins. He began, his voice rough with emotion. You saved me once, when you didn't even know my name. You saved me again when you fought for me, when you stayed, when you loved me even when you thought you shouldn't. Her lips trembled. Alex, I don't want 2 years with you, he whispered. I want all the years, every morning, every night, every version of whatever life has left to give us. He swallowed hard. I want a future with you, not because a contract binds us, but because love does. She couldn't see him through the tears anymore. She lifted a trembling hand to his cheek, cupping it gently, her voice breaking open. Say it, she whispered. Please. His eyes softened to something devastatingly tender. Marry me. He breathed. Not for 24 months, not for an agreement, but for the rest of our lives. Her answer came not from her lips at first, but from the way she collapsed against him, arms wrapping around his neck, sobs shaking her shoulders. He held her tightly, carefully, painfully burying his face in her hair, as relief and love and longing crashed through him all at once. When she finally pulled back, her face was wet, her eyes shining with something bright and fierce. Yes, Alex, she whispered. Yes, I want all the years with you too. She kissed him then softly, desperately, gratefully, and when they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I loved you before I even knew who you were, she murmured, and I'll love you long after everything else fades. His breath trembled. Then let's go home. Months later, on a quiet beach in the Hamptons, the sky painted in streaks of gold and rose. Amara stood in a flowing ivory dress that fluttered like a whisper in the sea breeze. Her curls danced freely around her face, glowing in the fading sunlight. Alex stood before her barefoot in the sand, his suit jacket abandoned, his sleeves rolled, his expression soft in a way the rest of the world would never see, soft in a way reserved only for her. Their wedding was small, just close friends. The waves and the horizon. Nothing loud, nothing performative. Just them. When the ceremony ended and applause faded into the wind, Alex took her hand and drew her close, his thumb brushing the new ring that now rested on her finger, shimmering like a promise fulfilled. "Welcome home, Mrs. King," he murmured, voice barely above a breath. She smiled, radiant, overwhelmed, whole. "Home," she repeated softly, as if tasting the word for the first time. Then he kissed her slowly, deeply, reverently as the sun sank beyond the edge of the ocean, painting them in a final burst of red-gold light. And for the first time, neither of them feared endings, because this was a beginning, a real one, a forever made, not of contracts, but of love.